Always the latest news and views. You're listening to the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand.
You know, we spent a little bit of time talking about this potentially great get for Montreal. It is the NATO Defense Bank, which I think up until the time we started talking about it, no one really knew anything about the NATO Defense Bank, except for people perhaps who did. But now we're hearing, of course, from, lots of places because Canada is going to be the site for the new bank. Problem is, at least for Montreal, there are other cities competing beyond just Montreal. You heard the clip perhaps of Doug Ford today trying to weigh in on this and saying that he does not support this kind of talk in Ontario. Apparently this happened last week where, some people there who want to get that bank to go to Toronto were talking down Quebec saying, well, with the threat of a referendum or separation, maybe you don't want to be there. He said he would not necessarily say anything bad about Montreal, and it's a great city. But in the meantime, there's lots going on behind the scenes, which is kind of where I want to go right now. Jacques Deforges, CEO of Finance Montreal, they just sent a letter to the Prime Minister basically outlining all of the reasons why this NATO Defense Bank should move to Montreal. So Jacques Deforges is on the line. Mr. Deforges, thanks for being here this afternoon. Can you, first of all, when I read CEO of Finance Montreal, for people who don't know, what is Finance Montreal?
Well, good afternoon, Aaron. It's my pleasure to be with you today. Well, Finance Montreal basically is what we call the cluster for the financial industry. We are an organization that has been created to promote and develop the financial sector in Quebec.
Okay, so you, along with others, I understand, of course, are pushing to get this to come to Montreal. What are you pointing out in this letter that you wrote to the Prime Minister? What points are you making?
Well, basically, you're right in mentioning that we are a large group of people working towards that goal. I mean, starting with the Mayor of Montreal, the Prime Minister of Quebec, a lot of people in the industry, and of course the financial sector. So basically what we said to the Prime Minister is that Montreal is ready. Montreal is ready, and in particular its financial system. We have a very diverse and complete ecosystem of financial institutions. You've seen the list in the letter. And everybody is ready to start now to support that bank.
So I just took a quick look at what is in the letter. You obviously highlight a lot of different things, but one of them is, you say Montreal is one of North America's leading sustainable finance centers. What does that mean exactly?
Well, it might be a bit technical, but finance is changing these days. With the rise of the environmental issues worldwide, finance is more and more transforming itself to make investment and lending decisions that help to have a sustainable industry. And Montreal is the top city in North America when it comes to sustainable finance. We have, as you may know, the largest financial cooperative in North America, which is Desjardins. We have the Caisse, which is one of the largest pension funds. We have two private equity funds that are sponsored by unions, which is unique in North America. This is all going in favor of sustainable finance.
Okay, I would ask as well, I didn't fully understand. So this letter is to our Prime Minister, but who makes the ultimate decision here as to where this bank goes in Canada?
The Prime Minister of Canada will ultimately decide about the location of the bank.
Just him on his own?
Well, himself and his cabinet, I guess.
Okay. I was under the impression that this bank, which is going to come here, will have some say as well as to where it goes, but you're implying that it doesn't?
I'm sure it will have its say as well, of course. This kind of institutions is looking for some specific conditions, and that's why we think Montreal is well placed. It's about the financial system, of course, but it's also about the fact that the Montreal region is very strong on aerospace, on AI,
right,
on defense industry. Not to mention, this is one of the largest international cities in North America, just behind New York and Washington. Maybe people don't know that, but there are a lot of international institutions based in Montreal. Right. It's a tradition of the city for many years. And as such, you could even say that Montreal is comparable to cities in Europe like Brussels, for example, or Geneva.
Yeah, famously, we always talk about ICAO, of course, being here, the International Civil Aviation Organization, one of many. But I read in the letter that I did not know this. There are 68 international organizations, including 6 with the UN, here in Montreal.
That's correct. Absolutely. Yes, this is
wow.
a little known fact, but this is this is really the signature of Montreal, which is a very international city, and this is what the SRB will look for at the end of the day. They want to have an ecosystem which is used to welcome those kind of institutions.
I would ask one other thing. You mentioned AI, and obviously that's a consideration. We know that Montreal is an AI hub. But beyond that, in terms of jobs that this was created, I think the original number that was touted was about 3,000. Those would be brand new jobs if this bank was to move here. Do you actually know that number?
Yeah, that's correct. That's a number which is generally quoted. That's of course, the ultimate goal of this institution. We'll start from zero and grow to 3,500 or about that. Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
Of course, at the same time, people must be listening to this and thinking, well, this will be a great addition to Montreal. Sounds wonderful. We're going to have jobs. But at some point, maybe, people with a history of some of the politics in Quebec, and I appreciate that this is not a provincial sort of issue here for right now. It's federal at the end of it all. But how much bending over do we have to do here? Bending back do we have to do to attract this bank? Do we have to offer financial incentives? What needs to be offered?
It's not really about financial incentives. This bank, as you probably understand, will be kind of owned by about 20 countries, Canada being one of them, but many European countries. It's kind of a NATO bank, if you want. So we're not talking about capital required by the bank. The bank will finance itself on the capital markets. What they want to have is a quick startup, because the build-up of our defense capabilities and resilience capabilities, as you know, the famous 5% of the expense of the governments is necessary now as we speak. So they want to have a ready-to-go ecosystem that will provide with everything they need to be in business very quickly.
Last question, and I have to wrap it up, is at the end of the day, Ontario, and I think I mentioned this off the top, everyone would like to have this bank, obviously, in their own province. What did you think? I don't know if to call it trash talking, but this idea that they're letting the Prime Minister know, as if he doesn't, the specter of separation or referendum works against Montreal. Did you think that was fair?
Well, as for myself, I'm a business person, so I will not comment on that. I will let governments discuss that. We feel that Montreal is a great file in itself. As I mentioned, the financial sector, the defense industry, the international reputation, the AI cluster. That's what matters at the end of the day. It's a business decision.
Okay. I also mentioned, I didn't mention, but I wanted to ask, did you hear Bernard Drinville the other day suggesting already that if the NATO bank was to come here, that he'd expect that the CEO or the lead of the bank would speak French?
I was behind him at the press conference. Yes, I heard his comment.
What did you think of that, or what did you make of that?
Well, you should ask him. It was a great comment. Montreal is an international city, as I mentioned. There's a large proportion of people who master several languages. I think it's a plus for a multilateral bank that will definitely deal with many countries around the world. Is
it a plus or a requirement?
Well, it's not up to me to comment.
Well, if you were to comment on it, non-politically, which one would it be?
No, I would not comment on that. Right. It's not really my business.
Mr. Deforges, I appreciate your time today, and I think all Montrealers would hope that we end up with that bank. It'd be great for the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Hello, Canada.
This is Bryan Adams Radio, hosted by Bryan Adams himself.
We'll play a few of mine, a ton of my favorites, and some must-hear behind-the-scenes stories from the world of rock and roll. One thing about doing rock and roll so long is you end up meeting a lot of the people that you admire. Sometimes you even get to work with them.
It's only love, and that's all. Bryan Adams Radio. I'm coming back to you. Now available on the free iHeartRadio app.
Hey everybody, how are you tonight? Sounds great.
Staying up to date on your schedule. This is the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand.
So you remember we spent about a bunch of time talking about the idea in Quebec where they were going to ban cell phones for kids in school. Well, that's now kind of, over and done with. But we are not the only jurisdiction doing this, of course. This has been widely tried in many parts, not of the country, but in the U.S. as well. So now, as they say, the chickens are coming home to roost. We get to look at a brand new study, which I believe is being released today, on just how effective those cell phone bans have turned out to be. Remember, the idea originally, right, was to deal with problems in the education sector like distraction, bullying, even declining test scores, even absenteeism. So how are we doing? Thomas S. D. is a professor at Stanford University's Graduate School of Education. He is on the line. Mr. D, thank you for your time. So new study.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, new study comes out. I think a lot of people hoped we'd have a simple, wow, this has worked out absolutely the way we wanted it to. What, in fact, has happened?
Well, unfortunately, the results from this study, which is the first national study in the United States, are pretty clearly sobering. In particular, we focused on schools that were taking up magnetically sealed cell phone pouches so that we were sure we were having a clean measure of initiatives that actually reduced phone use in schools. And the clearest finding from our study was some indications of short-term disruption, in particular increased disciplinary incidents.
Increased disciplinary incidents?
That's right. And we think there might be two not mutually exclusive explanations for this. One is simply that when there's a new rule in place, some students might run afoul of that, and that could lead to disciplinary problems. But secondarily, students who have been sitting there complacently using their phones and who no longer have that option may be more prone to acting out.
Okay. I wonder then if we can extrapolate, sort of this data. First of all, can you just give us an idea of how this was conducted, how many students were involved?
Well, we collected data from roughly 4,600 schools that adopted the cell phone pouches, and then used non-adopting schools throughout the United States as comparison units and observed their changes both before and after the adopting schools introduced these pouches. The exact number of outcomes varied depending on whether we were looking at test scores, attendance, or discipline. But basically, we drew upon all the national data available in the U.S.
And based on all that, the words that I see here that really kind of stand out to me are even so, bans had a close to zero effect on everything from test scores to absenteeism.
That's right, and also classroom attention and online bullying. And now, if you're looking for a silver lining here, I guess there are a couple of things one could point to. One is that teachers and parents are really enthusiastic about these bans, and teachers report seeing good things in the classroom, but the evidence for that we're seeing in the data is limited. The clearest example involves students' sense of well-being that they report in surveys. Now, in the first year of the ban, as well as disciplinary incidents were increasing, but if we look at schools that have had the bans for 3 years, by the third year, disciplinary incidents have returned to baseline, and students' sense of their own subjective well-being has actually increased somewhat. But other than that, when we look at attendance, test scores, measures of classroom attention, etc., we find no impact.
Which does kind of pose a bit of a quandary, doesn't it? I mean, the idea was we hoped this would improve things like test scores and absenteeism. At the end of the day, it doesn't. So does the decision then become, this didn't achieve the purpose we wanted it to, despite the benefits you mentioned. Do we keep doing this or do we roll this back?
Well, I could see some people responding that way, but I guess I would have a bit more of a cautionary note because this study's raising as many questions as it's answering. For example, one hypothesis is that phone bans don't go far enough in an environment where students also have access to laptops, Chromebooks, etc., that allow them sources of distraction even when their phones are put away. And it could also be that, as digital device use in schools decline, maybe students are compensating by using more outside of school. Or it might be there are other things within schools we need to make sure are in place to support learning, like high-quality teachers and evidence-based instruction and good curricula. So I could understand, certainly, personally, I feel disappointed by these results. But I also think there's more to learn before we walk away entirely.
It's funny you just said that. I thought when you brought up the idea of laptops in classrooms, right? You think back to when we were kids or when I was a kid, no one had that. And I know there's some people suggesting we need to turn the clock back instead of forward into what we allow children to have in school as digital aids, if you will. Have you heard that of people suggesting, can we just go back to reading books that way, or is that just so outdated we're never going back there?
No, I think that's where a lot of the ongoing policy changes now is not just to ban phones, but to have more digital-free schools. And interestingly, it seems to be affluent parents and the schools their kids attend that are leading the charge towards more digital-free environments.
Do you think we ever end up back there, or is that going to be a school-by-school decision?
Well, I couldn't predict that, but my hope is that as we move forward and we experiment with different ways of managing devices in this digital age, that we just couple it with a robust learning agenda. Because too often we respond to supposition and politicians react to that, but we don't build a complementary learning agenda that would allow us to identify best practices that actually move the needle for the outcomes about which we care.
Okay, interesting. We'll leave it at that. Very much appreciate your time this afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
The information and the interesting talk to follow. This is the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand.
When we talk about spring cleaning, we usually talk about spring cleaning your home, your car, whatever it happens to be. And I saw an article and I thought, wow, this is such a great idea. What about spring cleaning your digital life, your computer, if you're on it every day, your laptop, whatever? And I think a lot of the stuff that ends up being there just kind of sits and you never even think twice about it. But some of that stuff eats up a lot of space. Some of it is potentially dangerous. So who better than Carmi Levy, our CTV tech analyst, to give you an idea of what it is you could and should be doing that will make your computer life, your digital life, maybe a little bit easier and pretty free up some space at the same time. Carmi, thanks so much for coming on.
Good to be with you, Aaron. Thanks for having me.
I have a couple of categories. So let's start with the way you go through this. Number one, and it's always an issue, right? Especially when you haven't done this in a long time, storage space. How do you free up storage space?
Yeah, and that's important because as you get close to the limit of your device, it starts to slow down and it might crash more often. It kind of gets laggy and janky. So what you do is on an iPhone, you'd go into settings, then general, then iPhone storage, and it'll actually show you which apps, which files, which types of services are consuming the most space. And most of the time it's photos and videos. And so that's a cue. Go into your photos and videos, back them up somewhere else, and then get them off of your phone. Same deal on Android devices. You go into settings, there's a storage tab that also gives you kind of like a God's eye view of what's going on in there, so you know exactly what you should be targeting first.
Okay, but when you talk about storage somewhere else, you take it off your main computer, store it somewhere else. I mean, how do you archive it? Onto what?
You're probably going to need an external drive. So if you have like a big flash drive or a hard drive or a solid state drive, you'll want to use that, or you might want to go get one. They're still fairly cheap and highly recommend having it. You can also use a cloud storage service. So Google Photos, Amazon Photos. Apple has iCloud, which of course is part of your Apple device. So that offers by default 5 gigabytes of storage, but you can also buy more or just get I use a giant drive and I'm just constantly backing stuff up to it. So make sure that you back it up first, and then you can comfortably go through the device itself and start removing things and clearing off space. And remember, when you delete something, it isn't always deleted. It goes into the trash bin. You'll then have to go into the trash bin and get rid of it to actually clear off all that space from your phone.
Right. You have to, that's your second step. You've deleted it, and now you have to empty the deleted folder.
Exactly.
Okay.
but make sure that you've backed it up before you do that. You always want to make sure that you're not deleting live data that you can't get back afterwards.
Okay. By the way, when you talk about if you have an extra hard drive, great. I think most people don't. Something like one of the, what do they call them? Thumb drives, USB keys. Those will work depending if there's enough storage memory on them, right?
Exactly. And, older ones might not. You may have a few small ones lying around, 4 gigabytes, 8 gigabytes. It's probably not going to cut it. We're talking about the big ones and like the 500 gigs or terabyte class. Those are sort of the ones that you want to sort of put everything on. And you can go through all of your devices there with more than enough space for it. I also worry you don't want to put all your important stuff on a thumb drive that you can easily, lose out of your pocket. So make sure it's big enough that you remember where it ends up after you back everything up to it.
By the way, I should point out, I've heard a lot, obviously, about memory prices soaring. We know what AI has done to that. I went to the other day to buy an SD card for something that I have, which used to cost $20. It was $90.
Yeah, they have gone up.
It's crazy.
Yeah, but the good news is a lot of us still have a lot of these just floating around. I went through my desk drawer because I didn't want to buy a new one. And I found things that I had not seen for years, and I'm using those for my backup. So chances are you may already have that in your house. Okay,
let's move on to email. We probably all have, emails that are full of stuff we just ignore, and it piles up and piles up and piles up. Is it really important? Does that take up a lot of data? Should you declutter your inbox?
Very much so. Slows it down. Also, makes from a security perspective, it's good to have a relatively clear inbox. Go into your inbox, sort it by size. That'll show the biggest stuff rising to the top. Usually things with big file attachments, your friends who keep sending you videos as attachments, get rid of those.
Okay.
Also, I like to do, I sort by either the sender, because there are some sources that I, don't necessarily want to hear from, and those tend to pile up over time. You ignore them, but you don't delete them during the year. Then you can just whack them all off in one shot, just by selecting all the same ones from a particular sender. Also, look at things like mailing lists or newsletters. Those are things, if you haven't read it in 6 months, get rid of them from your inbox and then unsubscribe so it'll stop spamming you over time. That can fill up your inbox fairly quickly, too.
Okay. I wonder, too, I remember sometimes actually trying to go unsubscribe. They make it as hard to find as they possibly can. Some people at the bottom of that email, good luck with that. And then just because you unsubscribe once doesn't mean it's going to be happening the next day, right? These things can linger for a while before you stop getting them altogether.
Yeah, I have a trick for that, though. I unsubscribe, but I also add a filter. Gmail and other services make it really easy. You add a filter, and then you automatically route those things to spam. Just mark them as spam, and then delete them. That way, they may still keep coming, but you're never going to see them, and you're not going to care.
Okay. Next up, you mentioned about an iPhone before, the settings in there. What about, everyone's got apps. I know on my own, there's a ton of apps. I'm sure half of which I don't even use. They're just sitting there. It's too much of a pain, I guess, to get rid of them, but you should get rid of them.
Absolutely. If you haven't used it in a few months, or if it's sitting a few screens deep on your phone, what it's doing is collecting information in the background, and it's exposing you to security risks. So go to each of these apps, select the ones that you haven't been using, go delete the account that is connected to that app. So get rid of the account first so that you don't have personal information hanging out there, and then get rid of the app from all applicable devices. That's really important. We keep way too many apps on all of our devices, and that's a huge risk factor for future attack, and also slows your device down significantly.
All right. Then there's one here, a category called social media review, which means what exactly?
So look at all of your accounts, whether it's Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, even LinkedIn, and ask yourself, am I oversharing? Look at your privacy settings, because they're probably set to public and you don't want that. You want to dial that back so you can be selective about who sees what you post. And then take a look, do a triage. Look at your older posts and ask yourself, am I embarrassed by what I posted in the past? Because you might want to get rid of some of those, just to kind of do a triage. Also look at your network. Who are you following? Who's following you? Who are you connected to? Are you sure that account is an actual human being, or is it a bot masquerading as a human being? So go through your contacts and get rid of the ones who, maybe are constantly spamming you, or maybe you think they aren't real, or maybe they haven't posted in a whole lot of years, or maybe they're no longer with us. Get rid of those as well, because, again, the bigger your network is, the more likely it is that a scammer can find you. And so you want to pull that back a little bit and then tighten your privacy settings too.
So here's something I didn't fully understand. It says it's worth checking which third-party apps and services have access to your accounts. Now, take Facebook, for example, right? Mm-hmm. You may have at some point just signed into something, then you don't see it because, it's just not there, but it is living on your screen somewhere, and it's collecting information the same way apps are. You want to take a look at those as well?
You absolutely do. And think about it. You get a smart home device, you get a smart doorbell, or you get a new fitness watch or a smartwatch. And so when you're signing up for it, instead of creating a new account, there's a little button there that very conveniently says, sign in with your Apple account, right, sign in with your Google account or your Facebook account. So you click on that, and then you go, okay, and next thing you know, you've used your Apple or Google or Facebook account to sign into this app, and it's connected to that account, which is a security risk, and we generally do not recommend doing that. And if you've done that in the past because it's faster, you might want to go into your Apple, your Facebook, your Google, and other accounts and look for third-party apps and services. There's a tab there, and it'll say, these are the other apps, the other services that are connected to this account. You might want to start dialing those back as well, because security risk, big time, flashing red light on that one.
Say that last part, say again, you want to get to it how to see what those third-party apps are? On Facebook, for example?
So you go into the third-party apps and services tab, and that's in Google account in Google, but other platforms like Facebook and Apple have very similar settings in their settings menus. Just go into there, and if you're not using them anymore, get rid of them. If you're still using them, then you might want to consider setting up a specific account for that, but do be aware, whenever you link Google, Apple, or Facebook to, that fitness band that you bought, you're opening up another avenue for a scammer to get in. And so you might want to start pulling those back.
All right. One thing I wanted to bring up, I mentioned how expensive, of course, memory has become. And, that's part of because these chips are all necessary for AI. It's just driven the price crazy. If you have a computer, an old computer, typically the advice might have been, the old story was they're supposed to become less and less expensive as time goes on. Well, that sort of particular equation is broken now. You're going to pay a lot more for a computer now. So is the idea to hold on to your other one and just buy added memory for it? What's the best advice?
A lot of it depends on sort of where you're at in the life cycle of your computer. But, if you can hold off with the hardware that you have right now, you might want to not invest in a new machine because it will cost you more. Obviously, if your machine is stuttering and the solution is get a bigger drive and put more memory or put more RAM into it, then you don't have much of a choice. And if the computer is relatively recent, if it's 2, 3, maybe even 4 years old, probably worth considering an upgrade. If it's any older than that, you're probably worth holding onto your money and then waiting until prices come down and replacing the machine entirely. Don't put good money after bad into a machine that's 5, 6, 7 years old. Just not worth it anymore.
5, 6, 7. That's it.
That's geriatric.
Is it? Oh no. I have to move that HP all-in-one's going to see the graveyard pretty soon, it would appear to me. Okay, Carmi, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Aaron.
That's great. Your computer now is old. If it's 5 years old, that's what we're looking at. 5, 6 years old. It's an antique. When did that happen?
This May, iHeartRadio celebrates Asian Heritage Month. Discover powerful stories, vibrant cultures, and unforgettable music. From inspiring podcasts to playlists that span East, South, Southeast, and West Asian artists. We're honoring the voices shaping our world. Listen now on the free iHeartRadio app and at iHeartRadio.ca. Your city at your leisure. This is the Montreal Now podcast with Aaron Rand.
I came across this story. Actually, I heard Jason mention this on our news yesterday out of McGill, a study that suggests that just icing an injury may not be the best way to reduce pain and inflammation, which is something we have basically been doing. When he said we, he means me. I've been doing this because we were told years ago, you twisted an ankle or did something, you put ice on it, 15, 20 minutes, we're good to go. And then you could do that for a day or two, and then that was the end of it. This seems to suggest something different. So I thought we'd try to find out more. Lucas Lima is on the line. He's a research associate at McGill. And Jeffrey Mogil, who is also on this study. He's senior author of the study. They're both on the line. Gentlemen, thanks for being on today.
Thank you. Our pleasure.
Can I just ask, as I said, not just for me, but I think most people remembered back in the day, this is what we were told to do. I mean, people said, you know what, ice your injury, it'll reduce swelling, and that's a good thing to do. And you're suggesting that perhaps that's not a good thing to do, or is the idea in this study that it's not a good thing to do for too long?
Well, I think what we're saying is that it seems to be a reasonable thing to do in the short term, but at a long-term cost. So in our study, icing definitely killed pain right after it was applied. But in mice where the pain should have lasted for a week to 2 weeks, the icing ended up having the pain last for 3, 4, 5 weeks instead. So it worked short term, but it made things worse in the long term.
So I fully understand. So you use this short term, and yes, it obviously, it reduces the pain because it numbs the area, right? It's ice. Is the idea you can still do that for a day or two and then just stop, or should you not be doing this at all? I'm trying to understand.
No, well, we think especially this very first stage, within a few hours or the very first few days after the injury, is very crucial. So that's exactly where we need the inflammation to take place and trigger the healing of the tissue. So icing at that time period would be the most detrimental.
Wow, okay. And is that because you're stopping blood flow by applying the ice, and what you want to do is encourage blood flow? Why would that be the case?
What you want to encourage, believe it or not, is inflammation. Now, we realize inflammation is the thing that's causing the pain, and inflammation is the thing that everyone wants to stop because then the pain would go away. But the inflammation is happening for a reason. And what the inflammation is doing is getting your immune system to heal the injury and start processes that are going to end up resolving the pain permanently. If you interfere with that inflammation, by icing, for example, you're preventing all this stuff that's supposed to happen from happening.
Okay, but at the same time, you see, this is the quandary here. Forget about ice. You're taking aspirin or you're taking, an anti-inflammatory to deal with that. So the suggestion is you shouldn't be doing that either.
That's exactly right. And we published a paper in 2022 showing exactly that steroid use or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, things like aspirin, again, they work in the short term, but they increase the risk of pain lasting a long time. And in that study, it wasn't only in mice, it was also in people with back pain.
So let me take this, if I can, by extension. There are people now, this has become a pretty big deal, people sitting in ice baths, right? Is that of any use at all, or is that just prolonging pain as well?
Well, it will be prolonging pain as well. And I think the most common use of those ice baths is immediately after a very intense exercise. In our study, we had a similar model where mice go through intense exercise and then they have pain. And in this model as well, icing made the pain last double the time, the usual time.
Wow, so that's out the window now, too, based on this. What about cryotherapy? People are, want to come back in 100 years from now, we put them in a deep freeze. Is that not a good idea either?
Well, I think that's different.
That's different? Okay.
But you are right that it's bad news. I remember our original study when we found out the answer, and I told my mother, and she was absolutely livid. She was like, "Well, what are we supposed to do? What are we supposed to do?" And there is one thing that is safe to do, and that's Tylenol.
Tylenol.
And also in the study, we tested a new method that is becoming popular, which is contrast therapy. In this one, we alternate cold and heat, and in that case, our results show that the one is safe. You have benefits of reducing pain, but there is no long-term detrimental effect.
But wait a sec, I'm now further confused. Why is Tylenol okay, but aspirin isn't?
Yeah, because Tylenol is an analgesic. It kills pain, but it's not an anti-inflammatory. It doesn't do anything to inflammation. And it's not pain the thing. Pain is not the thing that is doing the damage. It's inflammation. And so if you can kill pain without stopping inflammation, that would be something that would work in the short term and also not have the detrimental effect in the long term.
And would the idea then, if you're now getting a green light to take Tylenol, to just keep taking it until that pain subsides? I mean, is there a downside to taking too much?
Absolutely. I mean, the other problem with these drugs, aspirin and Tylenol, is they have side effects, and sometimes pretty serious side effects. Those side effects, of course, are with chronic use, and our findings are really most relevant to new injuries. So the kind of thing where you would want to take it for a few days, maybe a week. The side effects come when you take these drugs over and over again for weeks and months and years.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you tested this on mice, and I joked about this when I first heard the story yesterday, suggesting that, I don't know a lot of mice, with sprained knees or bad ankles, and how did you make this work? But I will add, from what I read, the results of your study, right, are not directly applicable to humans yet, right? So this is preclinical. How much of that should we be concerned with?
Right. So you're absolutely right that, mouse research has a long history of not always translating to humans. We're somewhat more confident about the translational applicability in this particular case because this is a direct offshoot of a study where we found exactly the same thing in mice and people. This is just another way of blocking inflammation. And so we're pretty confident that this is going to be true in humans. But of course, you can't know that for sure unless you run a clinical trial. And so we're currently running such a clinical trial to see what icing does to the duration of pain after wisdom tooth extraction.
Oh, okay. Because that, of course, would be something to do with pain. You put that ice pack on your face, I guess, right, to kill that.
Put the ice pack on your cheek, exactly.
Right.
And normally the pain goes away in 3-4 days, and we're going to see if icing prolongs that or shortens it.
Okay. Listen, we'll talk again. I should tell you, a lot of people are very concerned that mice, have been put through a strenuous physical test here, as you're suggesting, right? I don't know what you do. What do you speed up the wheel? How does that work?
No, they just have to run on a wheel for 2 hours, but they do it.
2 hours?
Yeah.
They actually really, really like it.
Lucky they didn't die. Okay, gentlemen, I thank you so much. This is interesting. I hope we can follow up on this. Lucas Lima, Jeffrey Mogil over at McGill. Thank you, guys. Look, to be fair, as I said, when this first came up, and I said seems a bit unfair to mice, so I thought, because, to be fair, I reached out, we did, for this story to the International Federation of Mice and received this audio statement from their president, Gerald Mouse. Brian?
I have recently become aware of the study in which members of my community were subjected to ice packs and muscle injury protocols in the name of sports medicine research. First, with the greatest respect to the researchers involved, I would like to raise a procedural concern. When was the last time you saw a mouse pull a hamstring or turn an ankle?
Fair.
Our musculature bears approximately zero resemblance to the injury-prone, poorly maintained muscle tissue of your average middle-aged human male. Might I therefore suggest, with the greatest scientific humility, that a more appropriate test subject might have been found? What about cats as an example? After all, they spend most of the day in states of aggressive leisure, punctuated by brief explosive bursts of activity, which I believe is remarkably similar to the lifestyle of most of the humans your research is designed to help. Which brings me to my broader point. I have been authorized to speak on behalf of the International Federation of Mice to formally request that the scientific community reconsider its long-standing tradition of using mice as its default research subject for human studies. That decision needs re-examination. We do not have sports injuries. We do not get the same diseases you do. And our life expectancy of 2 years makes long-term studies somewhat philosophically fraught. Cats, on the other hand, have 9 lives. So the opportunities for longitudinal research are practically unlimited. Thank you for your attention to this matter, and please pass the cheese.
All right, so there you go. Thank you. Very well spoken, I think, right? Representing the International Federation of Mice, not real happy with this type of study.
Listen live to Montreal Now with Aaron Rand. Weekdays from 2 until 6. Miss something? Find on-demand highlights at CJAD800.com. or on the free iHeartRadio app. This May, iHeartRadio celebrates Asian Heritage Month. Discover powerful stories, vibrant cultures, and unforgettable music. From inspiring podcasts to playlists that span East, South, Southeast, and West Asian artists. We're honoring the voices shaping our world. Listen now on the free iHeartRadio app and at iHeartRadio.ca.